live webinar, and also to those who will later on listen to YouTube. I think this is a very interesting and very important topic, content-wise, but also it is a very interesting one as this doctoral dissertation that Nadia Tarasenko has just recently defended. And so we congratulate you again from our side. And we really want to have some time listening to you, but we also would like to have a time to ask questions. So we give you about up to 30 minutes to present whatever you have prepared. And if we want to know more on content or on your research process development, we will ask questions after that. So the other half an hour will be for asking questions. Again, thank you very much in all of your busy time as a mother and also as a faculty member in many, many other areas responsible. And just finished your PhD that you are willing to present it. So the floor is yours.
Thank you, Dr. Penner. Thank you very much for kind words. Just to introduce myself, I am a faculty member at St. Petersburg Christian University. So I'm involved in theological education almost for 25 years, first as a student and now as a lecturer and a teacher. I am 41, married, and I have 3 children. Probably you can hear them. I try to calm them down for an hour, but it's quite difficult to do because we try to repair our apartment because I have a baby girl, and my greatest experience the greatest experience and struggle and challenge was to be a mom and a PhD student. And the great struggle was that I came to the study and learned that I'm pregnant, and I finished my study and again learned that I'm pregnant. So 2 children were born in this process. So this PhD thesis writing was very difficult to me. So we have 2 boys, 9 and 5 years old, and 1 baby girl. She turns 1 year old just in May last week. I tell you a little bit about my thesis just to give you a hint or a sense what it was about. Yes, if we could do so and so. Sorry. Oh, yes. My paper is called Spiritual Formation in Russian Theological Institutions of St. Petersburg. I was always interested in spirituality and spiritual formation, and I know that spiritual formation is a very important factor that should be delivered and deliberately integrated within theological studies. So why I have to study, not because of my personal interest, but as an educator, I've heard lots of complaints from students that institutions do not care for their spiritual well-being. There was no designated by the school a person for spiritual guidance. Also, there were lots of there was some dissatisfaction with Russian Protestant churches with the level of education of theology students, because according to the pastors, graduates are not able to serve the church appropriately. And so the problem addressed by my paper was original because it has not been investigated before in the Russian context. how the process is done, what programs of spiritual formation and what approaches are. I didn't come. I didn't meet any in the literature. I didn't have any reviews or data found in the literature about how spiritual formation should be conducted in Russian theological institutions, or are there any difficulties within this process? Are there any means of assessing and evaluation possible they exist today? So this was quite original to look at those questions and to was to understand and with what attitudes spiritual formation is pursued in a representative set of theological institutions in St. Petersburg. And the main research question was to what extent is the practice of spiritual formation in the institutions appropriate in the Russian context. As I told you, there were 5 schools, some representative set of them. Theological Academy of Russian Orthodox Church, which is Eastern Orthodox. Then there was St. Petersburg Christian University, which is evangelic, the Catholic Theological Seminary, Mary the Queen of Apostles, Roman Catholic. Also, I took the Theological Institute of Evangelical Lutheran Church of Ingria. Ingria because it's the region here in the north of Russia, and that's just the name of it. And the Institute of Theology and Philosophy, which was secular. And by the end of my paper was finished, by the time when I finished my paper, this institute was closed. I guess, yes, last year they closed, and now they deliver only distance educations. Why I chose those institutions? They all have full-time residential students. They are all 5 institutions well licensed. They could deliver accredited theological education, which is very important. And as they provide residential form of education, they also this also proves that a theology practiced and spiritual formation is taking place in a specific context and for a specific community. And so I could get the full, the most great experience, a wide range of spiritual formation practices. Education, and this was proved then in the survey. And so I tried to get the most possible attitudes and practices of spiritual formation in the Russian context, and then to get the most important and needed for appropriate formation which could take place in Russian context. Just to show you some content of my paper, just to give you the sense what it was about. The first part focused on the purposes and tasks of theological education. Usually it's called different models of theological education. Actually, this was new to me. I was really struck to know the idea that there are different ways how we should deliver theological education, and I came to it too late when I knew that, because I was teaching for almost 15 years, and now I learned. It was really interesting to learn. Also, as it was, I look at the recent debates also on spiritual formation, which was in my second part of the chapter. There are subsections also. I just give you just main points. And I looked the relevance and contribution of each model and of each debate to spiritual formation, including the Russian context as well. And it was critically discussed. Actually, I came that theological education is quite fragmented, and this fragmentation is still fragmented in many schools, and this fragmentation hinders integration of spiritual formation. And like the main highlight from this, that theological institutions should re-examine the purpose of their education, because as the survey showed, many institutions, they have the official statement, what they do and what they deliver and for what purpose, but actually they don't understand what they do. They just deliver theological knowledge without no sense. This what the survey showed. Yeah, this was really very interesting to learn, but they should re-examine the purpose of the education concerning spiritual formation, because without it, spiritual formation is a benchmark of theological education, and without it, any education in theology is useless to some extent. Also, I figure out that all existing models contribute towards spiritual formation to a greater or lesser degree, but for better integration of spiritual formation, it should be intentional. Leadership of institutions should be focused on it and integrated in all the parts of educational process. So this is like the summary. Also, spiritual formation contributes to the holistic development, provides like a theoretical, the theoretical basis for the primary data gathering. So it included several points, as you can see on the screen. Chapter 4 was, chapter 2, sorry. Something with my screen. Yeah, chapter 2. It should be chapter 2. It was mainly about the context, because the engagement with the context has been a significant marker for appropriate theological education. And here in this chapter, I looked at two concepts. One is a secular one, which is called воспитание, and the other is обожение, which is more a religious one, taken from Russian Orthodox theology. Just to give you the idea what воспитание is, it's usually translated into English as moral and spiritual education, but it's not exactly what Russian people mean talking about воспитание. Воспитание is the complex pedagogical process of bringing up a person in the society. So it takes place from when a child is born, and we have the practice of bringing children to a kindergarten, or even in the Soviet time, children began to visit, I don't know, like it's like a school, but they started to visit such a school 1 year old. It's like a kindergarten. I know that it's a German term. I don't know how to explain it in English, but it's like a small school where children are taken and they spend a day there, and there are certain teachers who help small children to integrate into society. So воспитание starts very early, and it's the process of bringing up a person in the society for the purpose of development of traditional national values in a human being. And it said that this, right now, the state prescribed that воспитание is the core of education. It should be a core part, a very important part of any education, of little children in the secondary school, and also in these institutions of higher education. It should be there in the process. And secular authors are very interested how to integrate such moral and spiritual education. It's very debated, not clearly defined, because in my paper I showed that even secular scholars don't understand how to identify what is spirituality is and what is spiritual formation and how such vaspitание should be integrated in the process. I told that it's based on traditional national values, and you can see them on the screen. It's just a high eternal values. So usually they are all mostly the same in many societies and Western cultures. So just the same. Обожение, as I told, is usually understood as the essence to God for the purpose of union and communion with Him. In Western literature, there are terms as deification or theosis. Is taken from Greek just to understand it better. It's right. So it's limitless process to encounter God. Обожение cannot be reached outside the church without partaking in sacraments and without consulting a spiritual father for guidance. So a person who would like to get such union with God, he should have a person in the church who help him. And there are different stages, which is also was important because Protestants, Russian Protestants, do not like to talk about Orthodox theology or not be engaged in dialogue with it, even if it's our own theology, like native theology, which was born at the beginning of the Russian state, I would say. So, and this is a pity for me that we don't study so much our native theology, because we have lots of connections. As I figure out and wrote it in my paper, many churches, I think all of them, came from the West. Russian Protestants, Lutherans, Roman Catholics, all had missionaries from the West, and all the churches have those Western roots, but we have to find the dialogue. And so if you look at the theology of the Russian Orthodox Church, we could find lots of similarities. We use different terms to describe the same ideas usually. So as I told, paradoxically, secular educators show more interest in spiritual formation than the Russian theological educators. They develop different programs, make attempts to integrate spiritual formation in the curriculum in a theoretical framework. Unfortunately, Russian Orthodox theological educators have a strong theory and theology for spiritual formation, but they do not take part in the current debate. And practical application and integration of spiritual formation and theological education are therefore poorly done. So, and then I also looked, as you can see, the third part, at specific forms of spiritual formation in different types of Christianity, namely Roman Catholic, in all the distinctive features and the differences which exist between these Christian traditions defined their potential relevance for spirituality and spiritual formation practices, especially those in the Russian context, and were tasted also in the primary data gathering. So the second I've just told everything that secular educators is more interested. Right, that was just a short summary. Then my third chapter was devoted to presentation of the data. I used a qualitative research methodology methodology, sorry. As I wanted to investigate the value and meaning of spiritual formation within a specific context. I was given the permission to observe and take part in daily life of students. And this direct observation helped me to gather information from a specific angles. I also used interviews, which allowed me to figure out feelings and thoughts of participants that couldn't be observed directly. I used semi-structured interviews with open-ended questions in order just to promote dialogue and response. And also this method is flexible in order to uncover similarities and differences in the issues discussed, as well as to remain focused on the topic research. I also used the interview guide as a research instrument, just to ensure to stay in the line with the investigation. After that, the data was collected from official documents and reports available online in the institution from their permission. So interviews were recorded and then transcribed. I think there is no need to say that all the interviews were coded to protect the person's anonymity. And at the end, 6 major themes thus derived, and they turned out to be the 6 major objectives of the research written to promote data gathering and analysis. In my 4th chapter, the last one, was a kind of interpretation and analysis, my personal reflection on what is happening at the present time. Right. It was clear based on the responses that made in the survey that there is a need for a certain spiritual formation model, because the majority of institutions didn't have a clear strategy or priority for spiritual formation. They are not that spiritual formation which was conducted wasn't sufficient, because formation wasn't intentionally addressed to all dimensions. And so I proposed a certain model. It includes spiritual outlook, which consisted of 2 main topics, like the practical goals and operational definition of spiritual formation. Educators and students have used a variety of terms to describe the experience and the result of spiritual formation. They talked about ministry, character, priestly, pastoral, human, leadership formation, all variety of terms. And how they understand it, teachers or students, all these impact the way and methods which are used to foster formative practices. So the core of spiritual formation is transformation and restoration of the whole person. And it was shown and discussed in the paper that an institution should set several practical goals. Mainly critical reflection, which doesn't take place right now in the context. Protestant schools conduct theological education more in the academic way. And the reason for that is that Russian evangelicals are not used to critical thinking. So one of the practical goals is to implement to implement this critical thinking or deep reflection and meditation on what they study and read. The survey showed that you can see on the chart that schools conduct like 78% of the respondents said that they did not hear teaching on how to grow in intimacy with God. That means that it's more taken in a theoretical way. So I couldn't see any practical stages or practical steps how to implement or how to do the spiritual formation in the school. Also, it was very interesting to learn that Russian respondents thought of spiritual formation in different sites, and in the line with the responses, with four main understandings, they're like four aspects of spirituality, and they supported my model of a holistic spiritual formation. As chapter 1 discussed, there are different various dimensions of such holistic formation, and so it involves intellect, character, volition, relationship, everything. And so many institutes stress different things, not even institutes, just respondents, according to their background, they trust just one dimension. But that if one dimension is neglected, holistic spiritual formation is not conducted. I propose include all four dimensions, and students must be intentionally guided to interact with the environment, with the people of their context, just to become successfully formed spiritually and intellectually. So more interaction with the secular society also is proposed. Then I talk about spiritual leadership, that like a spiritual leader is an enthusiastic person. He is an example of modeling Christ to the school, and we have in Russia a saying that fish roots from its head, like fish becomes bad when her head is bad. So that means that if leadership of an institute, if a leadership of an institute cares about spiritual formation, all the institute will care about spiritual formation. So spiritual leadership should concern itself with personal development and the well-being of the people working at the institution. Also, I'll talk about spiritual environment. Such environment doesn't appear automatically, so it should be built, and there are different means how to do it. More, I talk about that there should be intentional contribution of the spiritual faculty for teachers and educators could have different roles, because spiritual formation is multifaceted, and the role of the teachers is also multifaceted. So they can behave as duhovnik. This is Russian term, which means something like an elder. It's not an official position. This term comes from church experience of the Orthodox Church. The notion means spiritual authority that comes from the experience of God by the elders themselves. So the role of the faculty is to heal the soul of a student as they have been injured by the a little bit two different theologies, Western and Eastern. And in the West, we say that God took my sins and he was judged instead of me. He was crucified instead of me. But Eastern Orthodox Church teaches that Adam and Eve, first people, just turned away from the right path and they became ill. And so Christ came to turn them back to the right path and to restore through it the whole creation. Of course, he took the scenes, but it's not in juridical terms like the Western theology says. So teachers and educators can produce genuine theology and construct true theological knowledge using those our Russian Orthodox theology and the roles help them to take away their sinful separation from God. As spiritual doctors, educators can see and diagnose the spiritual ills and also find the needed remedy to cure the sick. So there are also the channels who mediate miraculous gifts. Then educators can play the role of intercessors and they show the way, and also can pray for their students, show the way of transformation, how to build those intimate relationships. Also, educators can be spiritual fathers and mothers. They're a very important person in the church, I mean in the Russian Orthodox Church, because they can teach and advise how to live one's life in a spiritual journey in the right direction. They can listen to the struggles of the students, patiently support and correct them. So the role of teachers is not just to transmit knowledge, it was shown in the research that mainly teachers and educators, they just transmit theological knowledge, but to also to be a part of constructing it. And they can use those original native roles and to practice them. And of course, there was, as I here, right today there are no programs of mentorship and evaluation of spiritual formation of students, how they grow spiritually through the course of the study, and practical involvement also is a very important factor, because students church can give feedback about students' life. Learn that theological educators or theological institutions think that this is the role of the church to bring up a person spiritually. At the same time, the church looks at this theological institution that this is the one of the functions of the school to bring up a spiritual person. So it was very, very interesting data found by the research. So this was a little bit about my paper, my thesis. And if you have other questions than that, please ask. I'll be glad to answer all the questions.
Nadezhda, thank you very, very much for sharing this. I think this is really an important topic that you touched. Personally hope that those institutions also will take notice of it and implement some what you have suggested. I also think that it should go beyond these limitations. So I hope you have already some things set up how it will be published. If not,
No.
Langham Publishing could be an interesting place.
I didn't have enough time to think about that because we talked to and he also said about that. But right now, like the summertime in children, I probably turn to this in September. So yes, I'm thinking about publishing in what ways it should be done. And also I should publish it in Russian because not many people could read English. So right.
Yes, agreed. I have raised a lot of questions.
Probably I have a bad connection. Do you hear me?
Yes, we do. Yes, we do. The connection is sometimes less working, but I think we have been able to follow you through, and also now. And now the floor is open for any questions, comments to all. Please feel free to address your questions or comments to Nadezhda. Yes, please, Marcel.
Yeah, thank you, Dr. Nadia. It is quite a good piece of work, and I am so glad to see it. I am currently working on my own dissertation on spirituality, the importance of primary spirituality from my background to the transmission of the gospel. And I remember when you presented this point, you are talking about spirituality. There is an area where I'm trying to incorporate in my work about the importance of spirituality in the course of spiritual formation. Are pastors themselves spiritually formed, or they are prepared to go and prepare other people and not prepare themselves? And from my background, what motivated me in that particular aspect, that topic, is there's a statement often made by many of our church leaders that the seminary is not a reformative ground. So when people come to the seminary, the moment they commit certain offenses, you are just sent home. You are asked to withdraw or dismiss from the seminary. And they said certain attitudes cannot be condoned there. And the question I kept asking is, can the seminary not participate to check the spiritual life of the candidate to see which aspects where they can help the person? Does Christ not say he came for those who were sick to make them heal? I call not those who are qualified, but I qualified those whom I call. So I'm so grateful that somebody was thinking in this line and haven't come out with a great work like this. So I joined Professor Peter to say you have to make this work available so that some of us can draw inspiration from there to beef up our own work. So even if you are thinking of publishing in Russia, which will be more consumed in your area because of the context, but in the global view, the work has something that can be beneficial to us from other areas. So if you have manuscripts in English, please don't hesitate to share so that we can partake from it. It is quite a good work, because most of the time, those of us who are being formed to go and prepare people spiritually, it seems as if the moment we enter into it and start following a few things, we forget about our own spiritual aspects, and maybe we are overtaken by the politics within the church, by other gains that we need to have, by other growths, even from the seminary. Sometimes people enter into seminary and start joining the camps of the lecturers who are there because of their particular political interest. So the spirituality dies off immediately, or it dies down gradually, and we see people dwindle spiritually. So I'm happy that someone has thought about this in a more perfect way and undergone a groundbreaking research. So I just want to appreciate the work and said I'm happy the work can be able to feed me in my own journey. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for your great response. Thank you.
So you see, it is important to have it in English as well. So let's keep the conversation going on this. Any other comments or questions? I have maybe a question as people prepare, maybe to ask is, I know you have had quite a not easy journey at London School of Theology, changing from one supervisor to the other. And something of that kind could easily happen to anyone else. Can you share a little bit about how you have managed, what kind of difficulties you faced? Now, your acceptance as a doctor is not under question anymore. So you can just openly speak about this, please.
Right. Yes, this was also unexpected because my first supervisor, who was designated at the beginning, he was great in supporting. When it came to the topic, I had the proposal in a figured out that I don't know how to start. And so my first supervisor helped me to start. And he asked me very precise questions, which also helped me. He didn't say, oh, no, Nadia, this doesn't relevant to your work. You shouldn't think or write about this. But he asked me how this part of the paper or this part of theoretical material helps to build my idea, to build its to build the line through the whole paper. So he always asked me the precise questions, and he was very easy to interact. His answers were very quickly. I didn't wait for a long time. And so right in the middle of my study, I learned that he's retired and there was a problem that he couldn't follow me further. In my first supervisor, this of it, but he didn't come to in touch with me for a long time. And so probably I think it was half a year. No, I wrote to the administrator who should write first, my first supervisor or I, because she gave me his email. And I don't remember exactly who wrote that first, but this was like the half a year left unanswered in my direction where to move further. So this was difficult. And of course, the second supervisor was totally different. I got the sense that he didn't read my paper for a long time. Like probably he read it before the viva or an examination, but I got the feeling that he didn't read it because my previous supervisor always commented, made different comments and asked questions. And the changed supervisor didn't ask me anything. He said, everything goes all right. You're great. Just continue to do. And I asked him question, how do you think, for example, this piece of material, this chapter, does it fit to the context of the paper? I was lots of struggles with this. With interaction. He was very polite. My second supervisor, who was changed, he was very responsive, but I didn't get the feeling that he actually knew what I do. So this was difficult. I think like when I got the feeling, I don't think I got the feeling that when the supervisor was changed, I did all the other work myself. Probably should be how it should be. This is the way how it should be. You start with the supervisor, he just give you several hints in the direction, but then he leave you like alone. At the end, you should write your paper alone because it's your own piece of work. And probably this is what I heard from my first supervisor, the previous one. So probably this is what my second supervisor considered to do. That he thought that it's enough for me, and now I can move forward alone. But actually, it was difficult not to receive any comments or any response. Except that don't worry, everything is fine, you are doing great. This is all, nothing about the text. And I knew that my English is bad because my first supervisor told me that my English is horrible, especially my written academic style. That was really horrible. And my second supervisor never told me that. It seems like I was a great English speaking person. And probably this is because they're also, my first supervisor is an Englishman, was an Englishman. Oh, he's still alive. And the supervisor who was changed, the English is his second language. So probably this is also the sense. I also had very difficult PhD upgrade. The committee was very, I don't know how to say. The committee was not aggressive, but they pushed me down a lot, and they asked me to rewrite 70% of my material. At that moment, I got 2 chapters, and they said, "Oh, this is not relevant. This is not relevant. Why are you writing about this? This is not relevant." And so they just took away 70% from 2 chapters. And I think 2 years of my study left at the moment, and I was very in a depression. And they asked me to change the research question, the main research question. This is the main goal. This was a disaster. This I didn't know how, because there was a proposal. All the material was written to that goal, and now I have to change everything. This was very unexpected.
That sounds very difficult, and indeed this shouldn't happen. If your proposal has been accepted, including the research question and everything, there shouldn't be any change on that.
Right. My first supervisor also told me that, and he was also surprised. I don't know what happened, but they asked me to change everything. Yes, and my paper it was written in a bit different direction. I would say totally different.
Yeah, I suppose it had something to do with some structural internal changes of the London School of Theology in the time when you were studying there, and maybe in the faculty also of education, where your people were in. And I'm not going to name people, but yeah,
probably
this is shouldn't happen, and this is really a problem if an institution where you do your doctorate goes a certain way and then does that. Also, for most of us who are not in the British program studying, this upgrading idea is a classic British one. That you first write a MPhil, kind of, even so you are focused on a PhD, and then you have to prove that this is a PhD material to be upgraded to PhD and then to continue and finish PhD. So that is something that for some is absolutely new, and generally it works well. But in your situation, I'm really surprised that those things have happened. And also I mean, for those who are still looking for and have a right and effect on finding a supervisor, look for a supervisor who has time for you, who is also sometimes critical. And rather you have the critic before than after.
Right. Well,
I
but I think this is God's providence in all these questions. This is, looking back, I think this is what I should come through. So this was God's hand in this.
It is good that you look this positive on this, but I think it is good also to give the institution. So I hope you have had the chance to give some feedback on this development. I know Katarina has been also at that institution and had a bit of a similar struggles before she left London School of Theology. I don't know if Katarina, you want to comment or ask? No?
No, I think Ruslan has unmuted himself. He probably has a question.
Oh, okay. Ruslan, please.
No, I'm actually just excited about what you're talking about. How you survive through this long journey is just a comment, you know, to change a lot during the difficulties in own life. You're really brave. Just want to congratulate. No questions. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Yes, this was a stressful process. Actually, my children were brought to sacrifice, and there was a a very difficult point in the family in relations with my husband. We were not going to divorce, but there were thoughts about that. And actually I prayed and asked God if I should stop my study or if I should come through these struggles. I didn't get the answer. So I thought I should come through all those difficulties and to keep my family, because this is how God wants me to grow spiritually. So yes, this was a very stressful experience, like my PhD writing. And I really hope it will bring some good fruits for theological education. I don't know in what ways, because I'm in Australia right now, because all the standards in Russia have changed, and actually my PhD is nothing for here right now. But this is the reality, and I hope there is God plan, some God plans for all this which was written and done. So yeah.
This is another challenge, especially in the Russian context. How do you
Right.
nostrify a Western doctorate with all of the settings of the non-state accredited bachelors and so on, degrees? That isn't a big problem for the Western institution, but it is a challenge if you are ministering in the Eastern context. And it's not only Russia, it is really Central Eastern Europe in many ways very similar. So this is a challenge. And we don't have too much time, but I don't know, maybe there is someone who would like to raise a question or comment on the presentation.
Please, can I come in this time?
Oh, yes.
Question. Yeah, I would wish to ask Dr. Nadia, which is that major ingredient that you discovered from your research, a major ingredient that can be useful towards this spiritual formation in theological, during the theological formation period or in theological institutions, which is that major ingredient, just in summary form, since we cannot go through all the work at the moment, but you know those very peculiar ingredients that if they have been injected in theological formation, it will bring a good spiritual upbringing for the theologians. Thank you.
In the Russian context, I would say that this is Russian Orthodox theology. I figure out that we can have and can build a good dialogue. Today, Protestant students and educators reject any connection with Russian Orthodoxy because they think that this is something alien to our faith, even if it's Russian. But I think if we try to construct self-reflective theology, we should come into the dialogue with Russian Orthodoxy more strongly and deeply. And I don't say that we should just take what they do, their practices and their theology or theosis or whatever. No, for spiritual formation, students should think whether our history and tradition, our Russian native culture and traditions can be considered in if theology students and educators are more aware of it, then they can study the native roots, and this study should be implemented in the course of theological studies by educators. This also would come to overcome the gap between the churches. The theological schools need to talk more about our historical development of Russian people, of development of the church. My pity is that my students don't know their roots. So what spirituality we can build if we don't know our own roots? So we should come a little bit back to our historical background and practice theological reflection over Russian spiritual heritage. And this will help us to build, so to say, indigenous theological framework for Russian theological institutions. And also in the part of appropriate spiritual formation. So this would be the main stress, I would say.
Thank you. I see Christina raising her hand. I also have had interesting conversation the last 2 summers and the doctoral colloquium with one doctoral student who studies on theosis, doing his doctorate, and how this can apply to the evangelicals. He is from Croatia, studying in Romania in Arad. So I think this is an important topic that Eastern evangelicals have to tackle as they deal with their own cultural, historical roots. So thank you, Nadia. Christina.
Yes, thank you. If we have time.
Good question. I think we should.
Thank you, Dr. Nadia. It's great to hear of your story, and I'm just pulling hair. I mean, wow, such a story. I'm Christina, I'm from Latvia, and I'm also a PhD student, and my thesis is about women. So therefore, my question also will be about women. So I'm researching women missionaries from Latvia. But so from the content what you shared, I could see you mentioned Russian Orthodox, Roman Catholic, Evangelical. I mean, I would assume most of the students were male. Yes. So would there be any? Is there any spiritual formation? Would there be female, and would there be any difference in theology if we would reach out like for spiritual formation?
Actually, there were female respondents also in St. Petersburg Christian University, which is Protestant, and the Lutheran seminary. There was one girl, right? One girl. I wouldn't say there would be great difference between male and female spiritual formation. It's just the same. Right now, the situation in Protestant circles changes here in Russia, and many female students come to study. We don't have too many boys right now at our institution. I mean, full-time resident students. So the prevailing majority is now females. Of course, it's different with Russian Orthodoxy and Roman Catholics. Actually, in the second institution, which is theological also, which was in my research, there were lots of women like 30 to 50 years old. I got 2 respondents which were 47 and 53 years old. So the situation is not so bad with females here, I would say. So I wouldn't say the formation will be different between boys and girls.
Even though so especially you were
did I answer your question? Probably.
Yes, just that you mentioned the term duhovnik, which of course it's very Orthodox, and it's always, I think, like I'm not an Orthodox, but from what I have read, it's always a priest, so it's always a man, or is it a different? Or would it be
for the Russian Orthodox Church? Yes, but if we link the idea to the Protestant society, it could be a spiritual mother, because in the Orthodox Church there are spiritual fathers and mothers, and spiritual fathers become duhovnik. But at the same time, we can enlarge this idea here, which I argue for in my paper. And spiritual mothers can also become elders, I mean, spiritual elders for students. I don't try to reconstruct the churches. We are speaking about spiritual formation in theological education institution. So in our academical environment, there could be duchovnik, such elders of both sex. So.
Thank you.
Nadezhda, thank you very, very much again. And it is really also good just to see you, and we wish you continuing development, both academically, also finding some peace and rest after all the stress on your road, and also sometime more again with your family.
Yes,
but
thank you.
We really, I would really hope that we will have those both the dissertation in Russian and English, and maybe you should even somewhere present, think of a particular article to summarize some of the ideas, and kind of give also now, as it is, could be like a semi-academic article to say what kind of steps would you expect to develop spiritual formation. Like something what you, I think, said is that chapels are usually thought by the institutions as formative, but not so much by the students. And so this is kind of an interesting realities to put kind of a mirror in front of the institution and help them to have the whole person be formed, not academically only, but in the different areas. I want to thank also every one of you for being on this live webinar, and to those who are going to listen into this on YouTube. I think if there are ways and you have questions, we can find ways how those questions can be addressed to Nadezhda. So thank you all for this time. Nadezhda, you want to have a final word? No?
I think her screen is freezing a bit.
Okay.
Yes, thank you for inviting. So thank you very much for the opportunity. And yes, if you have questions, always feel free to write me. I can give you my email or
yes. Well,
social pages, so feel free to contact.
oops, I think we lost her now. Anyway, have a good afternoon, and looking forward to see you another time. This until the summer, we are not going to have any webinars anymore. The next will be in September, will be announced. If you are planning to join the summer doctoral colloquium, please register as soon as possible, as by the end of May, the registration date will be closed.